decorated differently, with variations depending on the regional style. In Pakistan, a truck driver owner usually pays $3,000 to $5,000 for their vehicle's external decoration. The art embellishes such trucks according to the particular tastes of the driver. Nearly every city in Pakistan has a unique decor. The Balochistan and Peshawari trucks are heavily trimmed with wood. Rawalpindi and Islamabad trucks have permanently featured plastic work. Camel-borne ornamentation is commonly seen in trucks decorated by Sindh artists. These trucks are also representative of different local, historical, and cultural regions of Pakistan. Thus, these trucks are also representative of different historical and cultural regions of Pakistan, the enchanting arts and crafts of Pakistan.
Your living is determined not so much by what life brings to you as by the attitude you bring to life, not so much by what happens to you as by the way your mind looks.
Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views in News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about two very important topics. The first one is about the Indian state terrorism in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and also using the Afghan soil to destabilize Pakistan. Not only Pakistan, rather I would say the entire region, and also to destabilize the ongoing peace process in Afghanistan. And we'll be talking about that. At the same time, we'll also be talking about the current situation in Kashmir, where reports, in fact, they have revealed that 40 people were, in fact, injured on the 9th of Muharram, and they were the victims of the pellet guns. They were fireborne, and most of these youngsters, primarily 40 of them, majority of them, they have lost their eyesight because of the pellet guns. And they were shot from a very close distance. So there are so many visuals available, there are so many photographs. I wish we could show you, but obviously we'll have to blur them. The second important area is that during this house-to-house search operation, in one day, they killed 3 Kashmiri youth, and if you look at the last 3 days, the total number is 10. And many have been picked up by the Indian brutal forces, and God knows where they are and what is their future. But I'm sure that the Indian forces and the law enforcement agencies of India, they are torturing them. And eventually either they'll be sent back or nobody's going to find where they went if they are killed. Mostly this is also what is happening, and it has been reported widely in so many newspapers and papers otherwise as well. Now, the interesting part is that it is very obvious and very clear that the settlement issue in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is very much exactly on the same lines what Israel was doing, is still doing in the Palestinian region. Occupy the space, change the demography, and then control everything. According to another report, around 430,000, I'll repeat, 430,000 domiciles have also been given to those who were not actually the Kashmiri people. So this is how they are changing the demographics of the valley. These are some very important points we'll be talking about. Let me introduce you to our panelists. On my right is Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi Saab, needs no introduction, is a senior diplomat. So thank you very much for your availability and for your participation in our program. We have with us Air Commodore Basit Raza Saab, who's a senior analyst. Thank you very much, Air Commodore Saab. And we have with us Dr. Talat Shabir Saab. Talat Shabir Saab is the expert on South Asia. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for your presence as well. Now, sir, let's start off from the Kashmir issue first. Now, things are really getting pretty interesting between China and India over the Ladakh issue. The forces are like, in fact, what we call eyeball to eyeball at the moment, as the Air Force is also engaged. And at the same time, when you look at the current situation, sir, in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, it seems that it is not going to be in control for them, because the way they handle the masses on Ashura, and then previous to that, I mean, nobody could go to offer the Eid prayers on both the Eids, and so on and so forth, sir. Absolute curfew-like situation out there, no hospital facilities, no food, no clean drinking water, no services at all, sir, and people are being massacred. I'll use the word massacred now, because torture is not an appropriate word for what is happening in Kashmir. So your take.
Yes, it is a very, very worrisome situation, has been for many years and for a long time. You see, there are two or three things. One, the entire sort of approach of the Indian government, as articulated by Ajit Doval several years ago, as soon as Modi started his second term, I think, about the strategy of offensive defense, which means you go out and you do things, you take action which can then protect you in their eyes. That's how they see it. Secondly, Ajit Doval has an intelligence background, and he is therefore callous. You see, one of the problems of intelligence is that they become callous. People are bodies. Individuals are just commodities to be dealt with. So that's the second point. The third point is what you mentioned, and that is taking lessons from Israel, because the Modi government is deeply impressed by the Israeli administration, the Israeli government, and it takes cues from Israel as far as Israel's handling of the West Bank and Gaza is concerned, where Israel is indulging in all kinds of inhuman, completely outrageous behavior or policies towards the population. So, unfortunately, Kashmir is stuck in that kind of situation, that victim, it's a sitting duck, it's a victim for whatever actions they might take. And then you brought out the other thing, and that's China. You see, I think this is a kind of godsend for Pakistan and for the people of Kashmir, because China has taken a stand in Ladakh, and the Chinese and the Indians have a border problem which is almost insoluble. And why? Because it
has a history.
It has a history, and why? Because the British Empire had forced the weak Chinese emperors to sign treaties which are unequal. And the People's Republic of China does not accept those treaties.
But even after
India
the Second World War, sir, even then they had
insists
issues
on those treaties. So there is what is there? There is a line of actual control. There is no agreement of a 4,300 long border. There is nowhere else in the world.
Is it more or less like the Durrani line, sir? In a way?
Well, Durrani line is, there is historical evidence of acceptance by the Afghans, the Afghan kings at various stages in, I think, 1893, and then in the 1920s, and then subsequently in the 1940s. It was only Zahir Shah who went against the Durrani line, and that was just after Pakistan's creation. So Durrani line is much more sacrosanct as a border than the border between India and China, because the Indians insist on a border that the Chinese never accepted. It was against their concept of independence and sovereignty. So, that being the situation, there are bound to be border problems, and the Chinese will stand by it. To add to this, the Indians removed the special status of Jammu and Kashmir and incorporated Ladakh into Indian Union territory. That the Chinese then put their
totally rejected that,
their
right?
foot down, and that this will not do and will not be
I mean, that is also going to be something pretty important. But moving on to you, Basab, now when you talk about the Kashmir issue primarily, sir, once there was this formula presented, the 4-point or the agenda basically presented by General Musharraf that no, we'll withdraw the forces, let the people live together, let the people decide, and then that is going to be the step 1 and then step 2 and then the autonomy of the region and all. Now that was rejected. Obviously they must have had some sort of disagreement, because I remember when Khurshid Kasuri Saab was the foreign minister, because when he was in India, I remember in one of the shows I took him live and he said, well, we will give you the good news in 2 or 3 days. So we were like surprised that is Kashmir issue going to be sorted out in 2-3 days? Wow, what a great move. But it did not. There were hindrances, there were problems, and even in the future, because our demand is different, their demand is different, and it's poles apart. We can't even see them merging somewhere. So that problem is going to be there, sir, and could lead to anything.
What we see in India today, Faisal, is sort of full affirmation of Hindutva. In fact, the previous governments, they were not vocal about it. This government is vocal about it. They want to implement this agenda, and all these steps that we have discussed are actually leading into that direction. We talked of Israel support and other things. Unfortunately, with America influences the events of the world, and the advent of Donald Trump actually gave rise to the right wing and the rightist movements all over the world, be it Israel and be it India. If you see India and the case we just discussed with China, India has no spine. It needs support and backing to sort of take stands. And they got a very good support from the Indian president and their
from the Indian president, American president,
the American president and the Israeli their protege. So this is what is happening now. They are emboldened, and they are further emboldened by the success of the anti-Muslim and anti-Pakistan policy and rhetoric that they, the vitriolic stance that they took before the Indian election, and its success. And Faisal, very interestingly, look at the economic indicators of India, look at the deaths taking place by COVID, and this would
highest
have rattled
number recorded.
This would have rattled any government. But Mr. Modi is sitting very confident because he still has the support of his populace. The Hindutva slogan, the raga of Hindutva, is actually enamored the majority, which is the Hindu
But don't you
population.
think that is the biggest fault line of India? sir?
Certainly.
If that is
That
exposed
is-
properly, because India was never a country as such. It was union of so many states
Exactly.
put together to form one country, Bharat.
That's true. And it needed a glue. And secularism was the glue, the binding force which could keep them together. No statesman wants disruption in its country. Every statesman wants harmony and peace in its nation, because that is vital for progress. But once your mind is poisoned, your thought is prejudiced, and you are so biased that you can't see the reality, the light of the day, then that's why you go into that channel, which is such a negative for your own country. What to talk of other minorities? I am not covering that, but I can see that it's fragmenting the Indian polity, and it's a multi-ethnic and multi-religious society, and it cannot survive with these extreme views. How can you sort of eliminate 200 million Muslims of India and other minorities, Sikhs and the Christians and Dalits and everybody? I mean, you got to learn to live with them, and if you don't, you can keep forcing, you can use your forces, your might, and you can keep bleeding yourself. And this is what we are seeing in their economic indicators. There's expense on their armed forces, their purchase of military hardware and from all over the world. This very amount, if it was spent on the welfare of their own people, India would have been a very strong country. And look at their narrow-mindedness. They are opposing CPEC because this is the American demand. And I tell you...
But sir, I fail to understand. Primarily during the first election campaign of Narendra Modi, not this one, the previous one, we all got to know that people like Ambani, people like Birla, for that matter, and people like Bajaj, Mittal, that tycoon of steel industry.
Yeah.
Now these people were supporting him, and everybody was thinking that he is going to bring the same economic revolution that we all witnessed in Gujarat, and India is going to be like a Gujarat model country, and things will flourish and everything is going to be just perfect. It did not happen. Most of these people actually believe that India should have been a part of CPEC.
That's right.
If India was a part of CPEC,
exactly,
Pakistan might have in fact not had the current position which we are enjoying at the moment.
Yeah. Actually, BRI would have benefited two countries most, China and India. I mean anybody who has a little bit of knowledge
China
of
and
economics,
India and rest the world aside.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they would have been the greatest beneficiary, but their mind, their poisoned mind and their bias has sort of led them into a wrong direction. They are looking at a power which is sitting thousands of miles away, and they are not sort of seeing the regional realities and how they are changing. And this is what it is. And now we are talking of Kashmir, and they have tried everything, but they have failed to break the will of the Kashmiris. And that's what we see just now during these Muharram processions, that the youth, the young people, they still came out despite all those restrictions and hegemonistic steps which have been taken by India, but they still came out. So they are not afraid.
Because according to the senior analysts sitting all over the world, especially in this particular region, so they believe that India has a certain amount of forces inside the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and they have called in almost 2,000, and then they have called an additional 40,000. Now the climate, it really takes time to climatize. It is not like that, you move from Lahore to Islamabad. You're talking about 16,000 feet. And the accommodation and the system, and these are mostly forces which have not been there in that kind of an altitude. They have never served there. There's no infrastructure as well, plus hostile conditions, not only weather-wise, as far as the enemy is concerned, they're right in front of them, and in a much larger number and a much powerful enemy. Now it seems that since this Article 370 was revoked and everything got very different, the special status was also snatched from the Kashmiris, a lot of demographic changes are taking place, and now we got to know that around 430,000, in addition to the previous ones, domiciles have been given. And mostly the people who are already residents, especially the Muslims, they have been asked to get those certificates as well, and they have been denied by the authorities there, and they are not given. So the actual Kashmiris won't remain Kashmiris, and the non-Kashmiris will become Kashmiris. This is actually, yes, it is the demographic change, but what a way to do it.
Right.
Dr.
I would just start by the way Kamdor Sahab said. Basically, this is advancement of Hindutva philosophy that BJP government is in fact pursuing. And I think the Jammu and Kashmir, illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, is the pilot project of Hindutva drive. So what we see there, this is my assessment, that if Hindutva proceeds and succeeds, so harmony in India and in Kashmir will be the first casualty. So we are very clear about it, and Modi government is also very clear that they have to go ahead with their Hindutva drive, and this demographic change that we say, and unprecedented. Like they are asking people to obtain a certificate. A person who is living in Kashmir, he is forced to get a certificate, and they are denying that certificate to him also.
Exactly.
No, and
you have to sign that you will not be a part of any political campaign,
yes,
or
yes.
you will not be a part of any sort of a protest or anything?
Yes.
They're taking.
There's a problem with this this whole mindset. Like Muslims are the first victims of this this demographic change. Yes, inside the other part of India, Christians are also, since they actually have to target two communities in first phase, that is Muslims and Christians. We can raise voice about Muslims, and some of the countries, the world powers, have to raise voice against Christians, discrimination that is taking place. The important thing is that Modi government will go ahead with what they have thought of Hindutva, and they have to have, there are writers in India who say, look, this Hindu nationalism is a better concept than Indian nationalism. So they just finish the argument that India has actually ceased to exist in Hindustan. There is no more India. There is no more Bharat. They actually want a Hindustan, a state which is dominated by Hindus, and everybody who has to live. And interestingly, the concept which was coined in 1923, this Hindutva, it clearly says that it's not about religion, it's not about Hinduism, it's about ancestry, and it's about origin, and it's about your place. If you live in India, so you are Hindu, and if you live in India, you live in Hindustan, and and Hindustan is not religion, it's your ancestry that makes you. So that kind of concept they're trying to go with in India, and it's very dangerous. Look, coming back to this demographic
So the
issues.
Muslim time, I mean, which was I think around 800 years when they ruled this entire area, is he taking the revenge that the Hindus were always beaten by the Muslims? Nobody could even stand in front of them, whether you talk about Khiljis or Sher Shah Suri or Ahmad Shah Abdali for that matter, or Ghaznis or Ghaznavis. There's a long list.
Prejudice that
And then the Mughals.
Yeah, and the Mughals.
The
at the
Mughals,
end,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that is that. I think that is the principal driver behind this thought process. But I'm surprised at the world's reaction to India or Modi government. They know this is something highly inhuman. It is the utter violation of human rights that you tell somebody that you don't belong to this place. You're living here for 200 years. You have ancestry, but if you can't prove that you are living here, you're no more citizen. You are alien in this. So this is what needs to be seen by the world, and it must be condemned by the world. That look, they live here, and in the whole world, in every country there are minorities. And in every country there are minorities, they have rights. Every country has minorities and they have rights. So why is so that India doesn't like their minorities and they are subjugating them, they are trying to suppress them, and they're just clearly telling them, you are not part of this country and you are alien and you have to go out of here. So I think the world needs to be sensitized about this very grave issue, and grave issues like when we talk of Kashmir is human rights problem, and world has to attend to this problem. Demographic, yes, since with demographic changes, there are certain things attached, like UN resolutions require you to be, certain people have to vote for.
But sir, if
the referendum.
So we'll take a break, but there's another question which I'll put now actually, that when you look at the demographic changes made, sir, and whatever they are trying to do, they will do, and let's suppose another 5 to 6 years down the line, there's a different equation of Hindus and Muslims. All right, sir? Because I've also heard that all those people who are retiring, and like in Pakistan, you get a plot or you get a flat or you get a house. So most of these people from Navy, Air Force and Army, along with the civil servants, they are being offered almost twice or maybe 3 times better incentives if they settle in Kashmir.
Yes.
We'll just take a short break here. We'll take a break. After the break, we'll return. Stay with us.
time for Isha prayers in Rawalpindi, Islamabad. People in other parts of the country may offer their prayers according to their local timings.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Sayings of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He who does not respect elders, does not have mercy on children, does not commend what is good, and does not forbid what is evil, is not one of us.
Welcome back. Now, so the last point before we switch on to the other topic was primarily about the demographic changes. What I believe in is, sir, that the way the number game is being changed and the way Muslims are targeted by design, they're not giving the certificates. I mean, at some stage there won't be nobody. I mean, nobody would know. Even if they were born there, they won't be able to prove it because that is what is happening. And on top, people from all over India are being supported by the center to settle in Kashmir region. So, sir, at some stage, I mean, if every person who's been sent from India is a Hindu and a hardliner Hindu, not only the demographics will change, the culture would change, and this valley is going to become a death valley then. Your take, sir.
We should not have doubt about this fact that if they are doing these demographic changes, so they mean some business there. They expect something inside the valley and in the areas in Jammu and Kashmir. So definitely if they are looking at referendum, at some stage, if they think that the world might pressure them into referendum in Jammu and Kashmir, so they'll have a demographic balance favoring them. So the most important thing is that you're right. They are actually offering incentives to various other, like you said, they are giving incentives to armed forces. They are giving incentives to civil servants to go and settle there, and and they are giving incentives, cheaper incentive. Like if you want to buy land, if you are a civil servant, you buy land, the land is available to the civil servant, armed forces, member of armed forces on cheaper rates. So they are. This is all planned, and that will definitely affect the demographic from referendum point of view. Plus, you have rightly said that it will change the culture of Jammu and Kashmir entirely. It will not only affect demography, but it will it will become like Bombay or Calcutta, and where you see communities living, but primarily dominated by Hindu nationals. And that is what I said when I say that Hindutva, this Jammu and Kashmir is the first pilot project of Hindutva philosophy. So they are going to do it there, and they mean it. So what should we wait for the time that they do it all, and we react? So I think this is the time that we must go to the world and tell them, look, this is happening in Kashmir. They are doing these demographic changes by design. They can't do it, and and somebody has to know. Somebody has to tell them these are the violations of international law as well. You can't do it. Under obligation, India cannot do these changes there. They can't sell, they can't buy land. If you're alien in Jammu and Kashmir, you can't sell land. So the world needs to be sensitized, and the institutions which were the witnesses or who actually manage those agreements between India and Pakistan about status of Kashmir, they must be apprised and sensitized. I think it is like human rights that we need to go out to the world and tell them that there are grave human rights violation being carried out inside Jammu and Kashmir. Similarly, we must tell them that these are the changes they are making in demographic changes they are making in part of Jammu and Kashmir, and it's not right. It's violation of international law.
Take comments, sir.
I beg to differ that this is some sort of a prelude to plebiscite. India, in their wildest dreams, they cannot think of holding a plebiscite there. Their effort is at ghettoization of Kashmiris. They want to turn their populace into ghettos by creating the
separate
pockets of there, and gradually squeeze them, and to break their will. And if I were to give it a name, I would call it ethnic cleansing. Because ethnic cleansing is what is actually the spirit of ethnic cleansing. You sort of dilute
hostile takeover.
You dilute the existence of a group which you don't like, and this is what they are doing. They are, at one hand, they are killing the Kashmiris, but they cannot do it as rapidly as they would want to. And secondly, they want to sort of marginalize them through changing of these demographic changes. So this is what they are having, and at the back of it, there is a word xenophobia. This is the fear of foreigners. But Kashmiris are not at the moment. Indians don't consider them as foreigners, and yet they are afraid of them. And this such huge country is so afraid and so scared that they are doing one step after another. They revoke their Article 370, they revoke Article 35A, and I mean, even other places, they have opened a national registration certificate to sort of marginalize other Muslims of Assam and other areas. So all these are their fears and their phobias, which are sort of leading them to a path, a channel of destruction. What is sort of supporting and keeping them afloat is their economic strength, which has so far kept them afloat. But that very
look at the current numbers.
Yeah, that is actually
20% decline in their growth.
In fact, it is more than that now by certain states.
That's what their government has actually
That's
accepted.
right. It's over 30% now, what I have read. So once India loses that edge, then the conscience of the world would also waken up.
I hope so.
I think so.
Sir, your comment on the same point, and then I'll
well,
put another question.
I think this will take some time for the world to come to terms with and to understand that their economy is now on a downward curve. Until that happens, as was said just now, I think till that happens, they will give the impression of being economically very strong. Now, the other comment I want to make is that you are right. I mean, the Indians are extremely deceptive. You know, way back, our people, our thinkers, our intellectuals, people like Sir Sayyid or people like Jamaluddin Afghani or whatever, they talked about the Brahmin mentality, which is Bagal mein chhuri, muh pe ram ram. So they are very deceptive. They are perhaps the most deceptive people that you can imagine. Therefore, it is very difficult to convince the world that the Indians are doing this and that they are mistreating their minorities, that they are waging atrocities upon the people of Kashmir, and pellet guns and killings and rapes, all that. So this is not yet being understood by the world. And
Sir, it is very clearly understood. They don't want to do it again. The question comes back to the economic reasons.
I will tell you.
Say,
I have
do you
served in
think that
Arab
morality
countries.
exists in political arena, or for that matter, morality is something to look up to, even in politics, or for that matter, even in diplomacy,
just
sir?
Give me a point. I have served in Arab countries. Forget about the West. In Arab countries, the Arabs consider Indians very good. They call them Hindi. They call them brother. Why? Because the Indians are masters, and this I have come to this conclusion, of deception, of creating the impression that they are nice.
But they know how to sell themselves.
Yes.
And honestly,
that
sir,
is why
we
the
do
Arabs
not know. No? Sir, I'll just give you talked about the Gulf countries, because since I was just going through a couple of very interesting articles regarding the economic ties between the Arab countries and India. I was shocked to know, why UAE is so inclined towards India? Because the bilateral trade between the two countries is $60 billion,
Yeah.
$60 billion, 30 of import, 30 of export from India.
Yeah.
And on top, around 3 million people from
Working
the
there.
Indian working in UAE,
Working.
sir. Number one. I always thought that UAE is such a small country. Yes, sir. America, China, and then Then you talk about Saudi Arabia, $30 billion bilateral trade, which is going to multiply at least fourfolds after that investment of 100
After the
billion.
investment.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
You talk about Qatar, the opposite group, such a small country. They still have ties with Qatar. Can you imagine? $19 billion worth of bilateral trade, $18 billion worth of import by the Indians of LNG, and $1 billion still negative 17 billion, but they're still friends. What I'm saying is, sir, this is what matters. When you talk about the bilateral trade between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, $3.4 billion.
Yeah, that's true.
Nothing. That's very unfortunate, because you need to capitalize on certain fronts, sir. If you don't, you'll be left behind.
That's not all. There is more. You see, historically, Hind, the word Hind has had a special feeling in the Arab mind. I was in Algeria. When somebody wanted to be nice to me, he would say that you are like an Indian. And that was a compliment.
That wasn't actually a compliment,
No,
because
I mean,
in states when people used to say, are you from India? I said, then they would ask me that, what is the difference? I said, well, we Pakistanis are much better looking than the Indians.
I used to say that, they would come to my house, have a meal, and they would say this meal is like any Indian, in an Indian's house.
Because the way they are marketed.
Just a minute. I would say that their meal has meat which they can't cook, because Hindus don't eat meat. We know how to cook meat,
sir,
and we serve
because
you
we have a blend of this side and the other side.
So I used to say, do you realize that the Indians don't know how to cook meat, how to eat meat? We know how to do
They have no concept, sir. I mean, instead of drinking the milk of the cow, they drink the urine of the cow. So what can you tell them? That is the difference.
It's very unfortunate.
And this is 2020, interestingly, sir.
Yeah.
Now to the second point, Afghan issue. Very close to a peaceful negotiation. Foreign Minister Mahmood Kasuri, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, sorry, in fact, had a very productive talk, and he was very clear by informing that India is going to play a negative role. This is exactly what was stated by Gulbuddin Hikmatyar and a couple of other allies. They do understand the importance. And at the same time, sir, when you talk about the Pakistani concern, that is exactly the same. So are we on the same page with the Taliban factions, or, sir, there is something else? And if there is something else, what is that? And if everything is moving in the right direction, what else still needs to be done?
Well, as Mr. Qureshi said, I think the Foreign Minister, we have to counter all Indian games and tricks, because the Indians will be up to all their mischief in causing, in blocking any agreement in the intra-Afghan dialogues, and also B, ensuring that there is no sort of common arrangement for all power factions to take charge. So this is difficult, it's a challenge, but I think we have so far been a honest broker, and we are now being seen like that. So we as we have always said in the past, we have no favorites in Afghanistan. We want to deal with all the Afghans, and we are not in any case a party. We are the Afghans themselves. Any Afghan peace must be Afghan owned and Afghan led. That's our position. So we have to counter Indian mischief, and that's about what can be done.
All right. Another important area. I'll put that question to you, and then Basit. It's about now this Council for Peace deal with the Taliban that has been formed, and Ashraf Ghani is also named the individuals that is going to be a part of that group. First of all, sir, your take on that point. And since Ashraf Ghani has done a few things which he never wanted to do, they were done half-heartedly maybe, or maybe under pressure. The release of the prisoners, even first of all acceptance of that deal, that this is what is going to happen. And later on, a very interesting talk between Abdullah and Prime Minister. So that was very encouraging also. Do you think the current government, the Taliban and Pakistan, they do understand the importance of Pakistan, and things would be sorted out, despite the fact that Hikmatyar has very clearly said that India is a spoiler in Afghan peace process. And he also mentioned, interestingly, that India is forming a joint militia force in Afghanistan to fight the Taliban. So that means to linger on what exactly is going on at the moment.
Right. When you look at Afghanistan issue, it's a very complex issue. There is, there are dialogue going on. There is a effort being made for the dialogue, intra-Afghan dialogue. But I think there is a fair share formula is very difficult to reach to. So I think there's a lot between cup and the lips, and we have to see. But it is in the interest of Pakistan that we have a peaceful Afghanistan. We have a Afghanistan where all factions are satisfied, and some kind of power sharing formula, which at the moment seems very difficult to manage. Why India is spoiler? See, India has investment in Afghanistan. India has investment which has been used against Pakistan. Now, we just mentioned when we were off camera, we mentioned about India's the strategy in Afghanistan. You see, in 2016, 1,000 scholarships they actually gave to Afghan students. And every year, about 1,000 to 1,500 students, higher education scholarships, and would graduate from Indian universities.
They go to India to get brainwashed, basically.
Yes. No, you look at the mindset. Now those higher graduates of Indian universities come back to Afghanistan, and they are now placed in they are
at the top
diplomats, they are businessmen. So what difference they are making? So that is the kind of investment, and other than this student scholarships, They had number of investments in their construction businesses and their connectivity projects. So India has a lot of investment. So when there's a agreement between Afghan factions and they reach a power sharing formula in Afghanistan, so there's likelihood of peace prevailing in Afghanistan, which is not in the interest of India. So India's interest is destabilize Afghanistan. So I think India will continue to be a spoiler of.
But so when they say that NDS is like this with raw, and obviously a lot of politicians are pretty okay with the Indians, and despite that fact, sir, don't you think that the Afghans are either stupid or what's wrong with them, that they don't understand that this is the country, these are the people who are actually trying to make sure that peace should not return to Afghanistan, it should remain the way it is, because that situation suits them.
Yeah, I just give you an example. I also fail to understand. When I was in a National Defense University, I used to interact with the Afghani scholars. So and even now, when we interact with Afghani scholars, I fail to understand why and what biases they have and what are the bases of those biases. So you have just since you are aligned with India, you have certain interests aligned with India, so you are not ready to listen to us, and there's some misgivings that you don't want to clarify with us. So I think there's some bias that they need to clarify, and we have to move forward.
All right. So closing remarks from you.
There are two losers if the deal takes place, if the peace returns to Afghanistan. One is Ashraf Ghani and the other is India. So these are the two parties which are most against it, and they will try to throw every spanner in this.
Because this man is going to go back to USA at some
Exactly.
stage. The only man who has stakes back in Afghanistan, whether good, bad or ugly, whether we like him or we don't, that's Abdullah.
That's right. And Pakistan's diplomacy is successful at the moment, but they must sort of redouble their efforts. That this
So do you think we can bring the Taliban, the current regime of not the regime, but the current decision makers of the Taliban close to Abdullah? Can we hold that kind of a negotiation where they can sort out their issues? Which won't be easy, obviously.
Just realize one thing, that this whole effort has taken place because of very strong push from Donald Trump, and his presidency is at stake at the moment. What happens after him has a question mark. So this is the time, I think now 65 days more to go for Indian election, and it's in the US election. It's in the interest of of Donald Trump himself that their soldiers should go back, and that's what he's
exactly,
trying.
sir. And the most important point is that who is going to win the next election? Because the current, if you look at the survey, Donald Trump has very, very slim chances.
This is what I'm saying.
If he loses, then you will be having a very typical American kind of a decision-making body sitting there and lingering on everything.
Because the deep state of US was not in favor of it.
Yeah.
And they've tried
Always
to prevail
opposed
on
it,
Trump,
sir.
but this man did one good
But
thing.
sir, I think a very important question would be, since we are totally running out of time, but I think that we should do a show on that as well, and that is about the role of UAE and Saudi Arabia, because Pakistan, UAE and Saudi Arabia were the three first countries to recognize the regime of the Taliban, and eventually whatever happened, who funded them and everything, we all know during the time of Soviet invasion. But now it is going to be a big question that who's going to support them and what would be their reaction if they are given some sort of a role, because it is not them dealing with the Taliban this time, it's their adversary, I would say, Qatar dealing with them. So it is going to be pretty interesting, but let's see where it
But
leads.
as they say that in international diplomacy, there are no permanent friends.
Never.
And those who are supporters may not be supporters, that's strong supporters now.
By the way, this business, just a comment that UAE, Saudi Arabia accepting the Taliban regime, I know how that was done. We were the prime movers.
Well, let's see, sir, whether we can
Actually,
do
we
it
had
now
the
or not.
American backing
But Dr. Saab, it was a
behind it.
pleasure having you. Sir, thank you so much for your presence as well, and it's always good to see you, sir. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you, inshallah, tomorrow at 8. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.